Authentication, humanity's evolving answer to a timeless need for trust. Imagine trying to sign into your social media, but instead of a password, you have to hand someone your signature on paper. Crazy? Not really. That's where authentication started. Today we log in with faces, fingerprints, and passkeys, but it all began with a simple idea from the 1960s. So, how did we get from typed passwords to biometric scans? Let's rewind through 6 decades of identity verification. It all started at MIT in the 1960s. Back then, computers were giants, rare machines shared by students and researchers. To make sure no one messed with each other's files, a researcher named Fernando Corbato came up with a new idea: the password. It was simple: type your secret word, get access. But there was one tiny problem. Those passwords were stored in plain text. One student, Alan Scher, printed the entire password file just to get extra computer time. Yep, the first password leak in history. By the early 1970s, it was clear saving passwords as plain text was a big mistake. This led to a smarter idea: using a hash function. A hash turns your password into a long sequence of letters and numbers. It's easy for the computer to create, but nearly impossible to reverse, kind of like shredding a document into dust. But soon, hackers figured out patterns in those hashes. They could use pre-made lookup tables to guess passwords faster. So, security experts added an extra twist: the salt. A salt is just random data mixed into the password before hashing, which makes every stored result unique, even if two people use the same password. That uniqueness stops attackers from matching hashes across users or using ready-made lists to crack them. This simple combo of hash and salt was a huge leap forward for password security. As digital networks grew, static passwords became easy targets for interception and reuse. So researchers began asking a game-changing question: what if a password could only be used once? This idea inspired the birth of the one-time password, or OTP, a security concept that flipped everything we knew about authentication. It started in the early 1980s when computers began connecting over open networks like ARPANET, the early version of the internet. At that time, when users accessed remote systems, their passwords moved through the network without any protection, meaning anyone who could monitor the network traffic could simply read and reuse them. Computer scientist Leslie Lamport at MIT noticed this serious flaw. Lamport proposed a method where instead of sending the same password each time, a user would send a sequence of passwords generated from a mathematical function. Each password in the sequence was valid only once. Even if intercepted, it couldn't be used again. The goal was simple but powerful: generate a new and unpredictable password every time and make sure the system could still verify it as correct. This was how the early OTP systems were designed, an elegant way to stop replay attacks where stolen credentials got used again and again. At first, OTPs came printed on paper lists. Users would cross off each code after using it. Then came the era of hardware tokens, little key fob devices that displayed a new code every 60 seconds. Inside it, a tiny clock and a shared secret key worked together to create those numbers. OTPs solved password reuse, but there was still one problem. To generate or verify those one-time codes, both the user and the server still had to share a secret key. As computers began sharing data across networks, one problem became clear: information needed a way to travel safely. Encryption solved that by turning readable data into coded form that only authorized parties could unlock. Early systems relied on symmetric encryption, where both sides shared the same secret key to encrypt and decrypt data. Before the 1970s, this shared key model was standard. It worked fine for trusted systems, but across networks, sending that secret safely became nearly impossible. In 1976, Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman discovered a way for two computers to agree on a shared secret key without ever sending the key itself. Their idea used mathematics rather than trust. Both sides start with public key, then each side applies a private calculation using modular arithmetic and very large prime numbers to create secret key. This concept, sharing secrets over an open line without revealing them, became the foundation of modern cryptography. Diffie and Hellman's method was the first example of what became known as asymmetric cryptography. Much of this research remained secret inside intelligence agencies until 1997. Once those once classified cryptographic ideas were finally released, they sparked a rapid transformation in online security. By the early 1990s, as email, e-commerce, and online banking emerged, encryption alone wasn't enough. We could already hide data, but the new challenge was proving who was on the other end. That need gave rise to public key infrastructure, a global framework built to manage digital trust. PKI ensures that when your browser shows a secure connection, it's not just encrypted, it's also authentic. In other words, it confirms that you're really talking to your bank, not an imposter. At its core, PKI organizes the entire life cycle of digital certificates. It's made up of several key parts: certificate authority, registration authority, certificate management system, central directory, and certificate policy framework. Together, these components turned asymmetric cryptography into a functional global trust system, the backbone of secure communication on the modern internet. In the late 90s, Tahir El-Gamal at Netscape turned these principles into SSL, later refined into TLS, the protocols protecting browsers today. That small padlock beside your URL is the modern face of encryption's long evolution. By the early 2000s, the web spoke a new language, one built on encryption and certificates. Computers could finally prove their identity. But the weak link wasn't the computers, it was us. Even with all that cryptography, a stolen password could still open every door. The web could verify a site's identity, yet no one was verifying ours. Passwords were meant to be simple secrets, easy for people to recall but hard for computers to guess. But as logins multiplied, convenience broke the system. We reuse passwords everywhere, on emails, shopping sites, social networks, even online banking. Attackers no longer needed to crack encryption, they only needed one leaked key to open everything. The fix, in theory, was simple: stop trusting just one kind of proof. Security evolved from something you know to also include something you have and something you are. That's the foundation of multi-factor authentication, MFA. Instead of relying on a single password, users now prove identity through two or more independent factors, each one hard for an attacker to fake all at once. Early MFA showed up through hardware tokens. Carrying them everywhere wasn't exactly convenient, so smartphones quickly took over. Apps like Google Authenticator replaced the fobs with one-time codes. Other systems sent codes by SMS or even magic links through email that expire after one click. Those automated security emails, the ones warning you about a sign-in from a new device or unfamiliar location, that's MFA too. Around the same time, another idea reshaped online access: single sign-on, or SSO. It came from the realization that users simply couldn't manage endless passwords safely. Instead of creating a new credential for every website, one trusted service could confirm your identity for all of them. When you click Sign in with Google or Continue with Facebook, that's SSO in action. But SSO introduced a paradox. Centralized convenience means centralized risk. If that one provider is breached, every connected account becomes vulnerable. So trust moves upward. You no longer trust each site, you trust whoever holds the master keys. The next leap wasn't about adding more barriers, but making security feel invisible. By the end of the 2000s, login had become a chore. Passwords, apps, texts, and backup codes stacked on top of each other. Security was up, but patience was down. Users wanted authentication that didn't require typing, swiping, or waiting for a 6-digit code to expire. As smartphones spread, they brought sensors powerful enough to recognize their owners. In 2011, Motorola quietly slipped a fingerprint scanner onto its Atrix 4G smartphone, the first consumer device of its kind. 2 years later, Apple followed with Touch ID on the iPhone 5S, bringing fingerprint security to the mainstream. By 2017, Apple replaced Touch ID with Face ID. What had once been cinematic special effects had become everyday security. Your fingerprint's ridge pattern or your facial depth map is converted into a coded mathematical template. That template stays sealed inside the secure hardware of your device, never shared online. When you authenticate, the freshly captured data is compared with that sealed template locally. It's recognition without revelation. Soon, biometrics escaped the phones. Laptops, passports, border gates, Even payment cards began using fingerprints and facial scans. Banks added them to apps, offices replaced access cards with quick touch-ins, and companies used them for secure logins. Convenience drove adoption, but it also raised questions. What happens if your password, your fingerprint, gets stolen? After all, you can reset a credential, but you can't change your fingerprint. That's where cryptography came back into the picture. Modern systems don't use the fingerprint itself as a password anymore. Instead, your biometric only unlocks a private key, a secret string stored inside a secure chip known as the Enclave. The key performs the authentication through a digital handshake that proves who you are without ever exposing your biometric or password. This concept evolved into passkeys. A passkey is a pair of cryptographic keys, one public, one private, that together replace your password entirely. The website holds the public key, your device keeps the private one. When you sign in, your device uses your biometric or your device PIN just to unlock that private key and sign a verification challenge. The site verifies that signature using your public key. No shared secrets, no intercepted text, no risk of phishing, because there's literally nothing typed or transmitted that can be stolen. But even that wasn't the end of the story. In the background, security researchers were exploring something subtler, an idea that identity wasn't just in your face or your fingerprint. It was hidden in the way you move, type, and behave. And it's called behavioral authentication. Behavioral authentication looks for patterns that are uniquely representing you. The rhythm of your typing, the way your mouse glides, even how fast you unlock your phone or hold it at a certain angle. Every action leaves a kind of digital tempo, a fingerprint made of habits instead of skin. Unlike traditional biometrics, these patterns update continuously, catching anomalies the instant your behavior feels off. Banks and fintechs were the first to embrace behavioral authentication, but finance isn't the only industry where identity has high stakes. Healthcare systems, gaming platforms, telecom networks, government portals, and the entire IoT ecosystem now handle information just as sensitive. As these services collect deeper layers of data, the appeal of a frictionless identity model only grows, but so does the risk. So constant observation must come with responsibility. Behavioral data should be anonymized, encrypted, and protected with the same rigor as financial secrets. Otherwise, the very signals designed to keep strangers out could become an unexpected map of our private lives. We've moved from passwords we memorize to keys we carry, to biometrics rooted in our biology, and now to the subtle rhythms of how we move through the world. For the first time, identity feels both invisible and alive, adapting in real time. But this power comes with responsibility. Anything that measures us, our habits, our motion, our patterns, must respect the boundary between safety and privacy. Because trust isn't built by collecting more data. It's built by protecting the data we already give. And this is where the next evolution begins. A world where authentication becomes effortless, where identity is recognized without friction and without giving away who we are. This is the bridge to the passwordless future, the moment where authentication finally disappears.